There's definitely an argument to be made there, but the moral outrage doesn't stand up. It's almost a pointless thing to say, I think. I've seen a number of content creators, if you like, using this sort of identity politics, intersectional feminism, sort of social justice rhetoric and logic to critique New Age spirituality, New Age influencers, and various topics, concepts, beliefs within New Age spirituality. Now, I have also made content in the past which does exactly that. So, I'm not exactly the golden child here who's just seen through it all and has never done anything like this. A large part of this channel in general is me going, oh fuck, I shouldn't have done that. There's inevitably going to be someone in the comments and going, aren't you critiquing something you've done too? Yes, that's true. So there has been some of this content that I've seen, which is largely people who, well-meaning people, and I'm not shitting on anybody here, but well-meaning people who have come from this kind of social justice-y sort of identity politics, sort of intersectional feminism point of view, and then they're bringing that to bear on New Age spirituality. This is where my first point on this really is what you've essentially got when you've got someone who is coming from this sort of online political left, because it's very rarely, in person, it's usually online, coming from that and applying that to New Age spirituality. What you've got is one counterculture or subculture attempting to critique, judge, pick apart another subculture or counterculture from its point of view. The trouble with that is that because they're both competing subcultures which don't have a huge overlap, especially these days now that the whole New Agey sort of side of things has gone more right with everything that's happened in the last couple of years, there's not a hell of a lot of overlap between those two. So what you've essentially got is, to some extent, the politicizing of New Age spirituality, this real attempt to apply the logic and the reasoning of one way of seeing reality to a whole other group. And the trouble with that is that each group has their own way of interfacing with reality, and it's the problem that you come upon time and time and time again. There's a reason that atheists don't always convert Christians, or Christians don't always convert atheists, right? There's a reason that New Agers are not going to listen to a lot of this intersectional sort of feminist identity politics critique. The way that they see the world, some of the fundamentals on which their view of reality is built, doesn't have any space for that contrasting view, because it's already got its own answers to that. And this brings me on to my second point, which is really this notion of like how New Age spirituality does have its own version of what reality is. People who are involved in that scene, when they're sharing their ideas, when they're making their claims, many of their claims are claims about the fundamental nature of reality. Those claims are either true or they're not true, or in some sense they're true and in some sense they're untrue, right? Because it's a truth claim. The problem is, I think, is if you're bringing moral outrage to that, which is what a lot of the sort of online left critique tends to be of things. It's, how dare you think that? How could you think that? Don't you see how bad this is? Don't you see how harmful this is? Bringing that to bear on what is ultimately a truth claim about the fundamental nature of reality doesn't really work. It's like, if it's true, it's true. It doesn't matter how much that outrages you. It doesn't matter how much that feels like a moral catastrophe. It doesn't matter if you hate it, And that brings me to my third point, really, which is that these two sort of worldviews are diametrically opposed because of, ironically, what I think is a shared postmodern sensibility to truth, right? So much in the New Age sort of circle, the approach to truth is that it is ultimately a subjective thing. And, you have your truth, you have what resonates with you. And although that is ostensibly the point, there are certain things that you should accept, like that in and of itself as being an objective truth, that the truth is subjective, right? There are certain things there that they do accept. But generally, the way that people carry themselves, the conscious beliefs and ideas that people have are predicated upon this subjective approach to truth, right? You have that from the New Age side. And then on the other side, within the sort of online left thing, generally it's about lived experience, which in and of itself is also a subjective approach to truth. It's, I've had this experience and it made me feel this way, therefore that thing is harmful. I feel like because of that, they sort of bash up against each other, that it's almost impossible for these two things to actually hear the critique of another unless the person hearing that, who's in one of these camps, has some sort of like other belief that will appeal to, you know, some sort of other, and of course that's going to be the case. That's why there are people who are leaving New Age spirituality and then going in to do these sorts of forms of criticisms, you know. But I think that the trouble is here that if you've got someone who is claiming that, for example, like the idea of twin flames, this is a point I made in my twin flames video, the idea of twin flames being two halves of a soul, one masculine, one feminine, that when they incarnate on Earth, meet and then become one whole soul, right? Codependency and the toxic implications of that for relationships aside, my point in that was, well, what about non-binary people? Do they have a masculine or feminine soul? And isn't that just another way of saying who's the man in a gay or lesbian couple, right? In that sense, there's definitely an argument to be made there, but the moral outrage, well, how come you're not being inclusive with your ideas of twin flames, doesn't stand up. It's almost a pointless thing to say, I think. Really, the question should be, is it true two halves of a soul are coming down to Earth and incarnating and blah, 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 or not? And if it's not, the question then becomes, how can you say that with certainty? And then we arrive at the conclusion that, well, many of these kinds of claims are unverifiable, and many people do assert these things without certainty. And for them, the issue is not whether it is true or not necessarily, it's whether it feels like it's true to them. And therein you have the issue with New Age spirituality's subjective approach to truth, which there I think is where these two things do overlap in the small way that they do, but they overlap in a way that actually makes it very difficult for them to find a common ground, because they're both making claims to their own subjective read on reality, their own version of the truth, you know. One thing worth remembering is that if we really want to change minds, understanding the worldview of the person we're speaking to and appealing to their values will go a lot further than hitting them over the head with our own worldview. And also, you catch more flies with honey. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Please be respectful though. If you're rude, I'm not going to reply. I can't be bothered with that. And also, if you enjoy the videos I make and you want to help support the channel, the best way to do that is through Patreon. Every time I upload a video like this, I include an audio companion over on my Patreon, which explores the topic in a little bit more depth. I hope to see you over on the Patreon if that does interest you. Otherwise, I'm Andy Fellows. Please be kind and ask good questions, and I'll see you in the next one.